Hello, writers. I'm welcoming you into week 6, how to write a book in 90 days. And I'm excited about today's topic, which is butt glue. Have you heard of this, butt glue? I thought that was a clever, fun title, and I'll talk about it after we do first a visualization. I'd like to actually initiate you into a centering exercise that you can continue to do for the rest of the journey. Then we'll go into an art project that I want you to do some right brain creative work on your book cover this week, as well as doing a self-evaluation, adjusting your target weekly word count or page number. And so more tips on writing quickly, and especially transitions. There's transitions between paragraphs as well as transitions between chapters. So I want to talk about that a little today, and just keep it essential so that you can have as much time as possible to get back to your writing. So let's start with a little centering. So I'm going to invite you to take a few deep breaths. And with the breath, you're going into the inner landscape. So first, we're gathering our energy, and that might be in the middle of your heart, middle of your mind, wherever you feel the greatest concentration of self. And we're entering into the inner meditative dream time visualization realm. So today we're actually accessing a creative space, a special place for you to listen to your guides, to gather inspiration for your book. So take a moment to really feel. So you're not thinking it up, you're tuning into your toes and your feet and feeling a place on the planet, a special place where you feel most like inspired. Maybe that's a place from your childhood, a garden or a park, and might be, a tree in your own yard, but some place where you feel you are able to commune with your spirit guides. And you want to notice the land, and there may be a body of water nearby, whether it's a running river, waterfall, stream, a lake. Just notice the body of water, listen to it for a few more breaths. And as you look around, taking in the inspiration of nature, you notice what's happening with the leaves, the sun on the greenery. And allow yourself in this space to open, to relax, to welcome your muses, your geniuses, your angels, guides, seen and unseen, but particularly to welcome in a guide who is going to give you your book, and you can hold it to your heart. So this is a sense of receiving something that's fully formed. This book is like already written, and you can feel the size of it as you hold it against your body. And notice like the thickness and the coolness, the cover. And you can imagine actually looking at that book, looking first at the cover art, seeing your name on it, maybe the spine and the back cover. Take a moment to just amplify the feelings of accomplishment, pride, of contribution. As you flip through the pages, you may want to notice the font, the chapter titles, the table of contents, the dedication, just like as if you could just absorb it, speed read and take it all in. But I want you to notice a little detail, something you didn't notice at first. And when you see that detail, just take note, feel a smile inside. Notice as you hold the book against your heart again, how the book kind of transforms. It's filling itself in, it's evolving, and yes, it's written, but it's revealing itself to you. And then there's a glance that I want you to give to the space around you, like a goodbye glance, where you can keep this book in your heart and you're going to leave this space, but there's a vow to return. It's like a contract that you have with this space that it also might transform and evolve the more you visit it, but that there's messages here for you. There's wisdom, there's insight. So get a good look as you appreciate the setting, the water, plants, and then also appreciate that this is a place for you to meet your spirit guides, and they might transmit messages, whether they're seen or unseen. Before we go, what is the message that you're getting about your book? It's like your muses are speaking directly to the artist's self. So take a few breaths to really receive. It might be a mantra, it might be a reminder. Crystallize that message. And you can nod thank you to the space and your guides as you gently open your eyes and come back. So this visualization is yours. I invite you to practice it before your writing session. I invite you to practice it before bed, perhaps when you wake up in the morning, anytime during your morning practice, or anytime that really enriches your connection to your inspiration, your guidance, your book itself. And you'll notice that each time you go back, you'll get more and more messages. Like it's a container for your creativity, and it's going to evolve as you evolve in this journey. And so this also is the beginning of our really starting to visualize the book that we're going to create. And art and right brain exercises can sometimes accelerate our nonlinear results. And so what I want you to do is a mock book cover this week. So in addition to all the writing we're going to, jump into and continue, I want you to carve out a moment to go to your bookshelf, find a book that has maybe the size or shape or that inspires you in the same way that this book did in the visualization. And I want you to actually put a mock cover on it. Now, you might be an artist, you might not. You might, stick figure might be all that you're capable of. This is not about the quality of your art. Although some of you might want to do the whole graphic design and do the right dimensions, and that's all fine. This is more about the tangibility of the mock book than the perfect cover. So I'm going to give you a few examples. But I have had people do this assignment successfully because they took a book off the shelf and then take, again, my, I have a stack here, take the artist way again. And what they've done is, with a piece of paper, just put paper around it, a rubber band, and written the title of their book by their name on it. But then you can physically hold the book. You can feel it. It's not just like an abstract concept. It's actually tangible. And so I'm probably going to do that with this book because this time around, the book I'm writing is also a 12-week journey and is very inspired by The Artist Way, even though it's about relationship. The example, I've got a few examples here. Michael doesn't know I'm using his examples, but they're on our bookshelf. One of his books that he wrote was Peace Talk. And so he, just, ooh, that's kind of cool, making his book disappear. All right, there it is. So this book, he threw together some pretty simple graphics, but it's on, the cover, just pasted onto the cover of a novel, because Peace Talk was a novel that he wrote in this class. I had my first book, actually, I don't know if you can see, Don't Drink the Punch, I wrote on top of like a Buddha image that I kind of thought about. And I have here on the back my bio. Excuse me. And other affirmations. Is so cool. The book's like disappearing. It's definitely coming across from Dreamtime right here. But yeah, this was on Mutant Message Down Under, which is one of my favorite novels. And one fun thing is, you can see the actual book, which was my first novel. It turned out to be red, same color, because it was something that I put a Buddha down here as well. But I had this mock cover for probably 6 months and used it while I was writing this novel. So this is my example of 52 Fridays with my bitch. Title got changed to 52 Fridays. But what's fun about this is on the I just posted a little picture onto, can you see this? Ooh, no, you can't. Oh, the title's not there. This is The Story of O, which is a really kinky classic. But yeah, so I've got, another book. Here's a fun sex shamans book that I, drafted up, and here's the actual book. So the point though is, you take these books, and once you've made your book, you can put it on your bookshelf, you can put it on your writing desk, you can put it on your altar, you can take a picture of it, put it on this writing class or Facebook for sure. And it becomes all the more real. So I'm asking you to do this little art project, even if you're writing it across with crayon. It's not about the quality, it's about the feel, the taste, the touch, the tangibility. So yeah, like I've got, a bunch of other books that we have in various stages of writing. So that super simple project is not something I want you to take extra time or stress about. It's something that I want you to empower you, not disempower you. So make it your own and do it in a way that works for you. And once you've done that, don't let that take away from your, maybe of your 10 hours of writing this week, maybe you can put an hour towards that, no more. But the rest of the 10 hours, I want you to really get in the habit of writing quickly and a lot. And so I'm going to talk about butt glue. So I first heard this term in Hawaii at an artist commune. So I come from a writing family. My father wrote 17 books. They're translated into all kinds of languages. And I went from his house, the first time I moved out was to Hawaii after college. And that was with an author, with a beloved who was co-authoring a book on partner yoga. And so fascinating for me, because these two authors I lived with could do hours of yoga, hours of meditation. They could sit still, they could contemplate. But when it came to hours of writing, they just found like, oh, I'm hungry, or I want this distraction or that distraction. And so the joke in Hawaii was that they needed butt glue to keep their butt in the chair. They didn't need it for meditating for some reason, but they needed it to write. And a lot of authors talk about bum glue or Velcro pants or whatever it takes to get you to actually stick in the chair. I'm going to invite you to review your own, the bonding power of your own bum glue from the last week. In the last 10 hours, how many hours did you actually write? How many pages did you write? How many, whether you're counting pages or words, how'd you do? And one of the things that you may want to do every week is evaluate on a scale of 1 to 10. And I invite you to be an easy grader, to give yourself points for showing up to this call, give yourself points to showing up at all. Like, just be easy and celebrate every little win, because that's what you want to train your brain, is to see the positive and to reward yourself. And then what we focus on expands. But every week you evaluate how you did, celebrate your wins. And even if you didn't write anything, I did think about it. I did the meditation. I did check in with my accountability buddy. Give yourself a couple of points for that. Now, then you have to do the formula again in order to adjust your target writing goal for the week. So you take the number of pages you want your book to be, you subtract the number that you've written, and then you divide it by the number of weeks remaining in the class, thereby getting how many pages you have to write each day in order to hit your target. And so go ahead and do that. And then notice that a lot of people, their page count increases. And I want you to know this isn't just like voodoo math that we're doing in this class. This is actually the same math that if you had the publisher and, these yogis that I live with had an editor, and they were, and they had a deadline and they were working on it. And so what happens is when you've got a deadline, you continuously will have to like increase the amount of output in order to make it by that deadline. And some people's target pages become so overwhelming that sometimes panic will set in. And there's a whole fun, teaching about how panic can be helpful in the process of avoiding procrastination. But I also don't want you to exhaust your adrenals. I want you to have a healthy balance and a healthy daily consistent practice of showing up in a healthy mindset, like refreshed and ready to write. And one of the things that will help the attitude is if you do this internal visualization in the morning or before you're writing, it'll like elevate your state, and so that you come inspired instead of under pressure and duress. So then to get yourself to stay in the chair, this is where you get yourself, like, whether it's a cup of tea or some water or, all the supplies that you need, you get them right in front of you. And you look at the time that you're sitting down and you track your writing process so you know when you're going to take a break. And you want to use, the timer that we started off last week, and the 5-minute timer. And many people, what they find is that, I'll write for 5 minutes and then I know I'm going to write again, so I'll just keep writing. And so if you think about the metaphor of being a marathon runner, it's like we are writing a manuscript that is a marathon, but you will run so much faster if you do it in sprints, as opposed to, okay, I'm done with 5 minutes, I'll just keep writing. Okay, I'm running a mile now, maybe I'll just pace myself, and you start to drain and leak your energy. So keeping up the 5-minute sprints actually keeps up a rhythm and the morale pretty high. So there's 2 tools that I'm going to mention, and I've posted them in the resource section of the Facebook group. But one tool is any internet blocker. I use self-control, but there's other, time management online apps that will cut off social media or anything except for the apps that you're using to write. If you're writing on Google Doc, you might need your internet. But generally speaking, the biggest distractions are surfing the web or checking email, or, and you really want to carve these out. You want to make sure they don't come in and that you're not even tempted to try that during your writing time. So that'll increase the butt glue. And then also there's a fun app if you're like an early adapter or a gamer, and you want to like gamify your 5-minute chunks. There's an app that actually is called Write or Die. I think there's a couple other iterations with different titles. But the idea is you're typing and you're writing for 5 minutes. If you stop to think too long, then it starts erasing what you've written. So you have to continuously write, otherwise it goes back and erases. So it's write or die. And people love that because it gets their ego really, involved, and it's a game. Again, it's a little adrenaline junkie. Its orientation's a little like a stick instead of a carrot as a motivator. But there's different ways to increase the butt glue and just have more fun, reducing distractions and making sure that you use the timer. The key here is that you want to write fast. The faster you write, the closer you'll get to the white hot genius. And this is something that's really highly debated. There's a lot of messages in culture that like things, quality takes time. But I wanted to give you 2 quick examples because instead of romanticizing William Faulkner's like contemplating the perfect word for the perfect sentence and taking his time, and sometimes even like there's this vision of him yelling out the window, like trying to find the perfect word. And that is, a way of working on the rewrite, working, when you're polishing with detail. But when you're actually, getting the book out there, you want to stay close to your channel and channel. In order to channel non-linearly, you want to write faster than your critical mind. So you want to literally just like open the channel and let the floodgates through. And the examples, there's lots of artists who've done first time, they woke up in the middle of the night and wrote it word perfect. And we talk, we hear about Mozart doing that kind of like never having to erase anything. But the 2 examples is like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That story was written in like 48 hours. And Isaac Asimov, I pronounce it Asimov. He wrote 500 books during his lifetime, and his process was writing as fast as he could as well. He just wanted to write faster than he could think, and then you come back and edit. And one of the things to note is a lot like the fantasy is, I want to write word perfect and have it be so like such perfection that I don't have to rewrite. And that's not what we're going for. We want to write it as it comes through to get the material down there so that we have permission to be able to like move around the pieces and rewrite and play. And so a lot of hot genius does come through the quick writing that wouldn't come through if you overthought it and edited it before you even wrote it. So, ultimately you're going to find your own voice and style, but during this next week, especially stick to the 5-minute chunks, try to write as fast as you can. And then what'll happen is you're learning your style as a writer, because if last week you didn't write during the writing times that you set out to write, then I'm going to invite you to try new times, to try new spaces, to like be like, okay, cool, I'm learning my style. And I want you to know, writing times and styles are so idiosyncratic. I have gone to so many writing courses, like all through college, where it's like every time a new famous writer would come in to be interviewed, the question's like, ooh, when do you write? How do you write? And the answers varied. First thing in the morning, late at night, at lunchtime, like I go for a walk first. I write by the window. Oh, I write in the dark. It's like, it's totally different for different people. The key is what works for you. And so my hope is that by experimenting last week, saying, out of the 10 hours, I produced this much. What about this week? Do you want to try different kinds of hours and, play around with what is the truth of your style? Which includes, your biochemistry, your circadian rhythms, your, lifestyle, your programming, it's so complex for different people. So over time, you will find your rhythm. And then as we mature, that changes too. So I want to speak to what happens between the 5-minute chunks. So if you got 5-minute chunks that you're writing, your manuscript might feel a little bit chunky. It might feel like, oh, I wrote about this and then this, and what holds them together. Not butt glue, but transitions. So what holds, and I'll make a distinction too. When we're writing, sometimes they're case studies, sometimes they're concepts, sometimes they're scenes, sometimes they're sketches, sometimes they're summaries. There's lots of different kinds of writing. And, in a scene, whether it's novel or, memoir or even nonfiction, a scene means that you're in a particular space. Like I'm right now, I'm in Scotland. That's what this background scene is. And for the duration of the time that you're this character in that space, then that's a scene. If a new character comes in, it's a new scene. So the scene has a lot to do with like, hey, there's this, but sometimes you're writing setting, which is like, you could write about Scotland without me in it. And that's just setting. But the reason I'm pointing that out is because sometimes a paragraph will be about a scene, and then say we want to move to describing the next setting. What takes us from that chunk into the next chunk is a transition. And the transition, I'm going to suggest, you may already be writing them inherently because most of us are storytellers and it's in our nature to connect the dots, and you might not need this advice at all. But some people may be writing about this, scene that's happening, about this lonely writer at her desk in Scotland. And then they want to transition to going outside into the fields. And what I recommend is the transition has one word that connects. If the first paragraph is like lonely, then we might say fatigued, and then we might say fields. And so it'd be one word that condenses the first chunk, and it might be a power word, but it might also be just the theme of it. What's the transition word between? And I'm saying fatigued because maybe they got just exhausted from writing. Never write about writers. It's very boring, makes for boring literature. But then going to the fields to rejuvenate and raise their spirits. So what I'm pointing out is that if you just write one sentence that kind of includes, where you're coming from and where you're going to, that one sentence can make all the difference in the stitching together. And the other way to think of transitions, by the way, the metaphor that I like is if the book is a quilt. And I've actually made my own quilt. And I'm not very home ec. This is very domestic, womanly arts thing to do. But I remember creating the patches, the swaths, and stacking them. And then it was a matter of bringing them all together. And that, where I actually had to, sometimes people will embroider them and take a lot of time, and I'm just teaching you how to sew them together, to stitch them together the fastest way. And then later, you might want to tie a little bow in the corner or whatever to doll it up. But the idea is, how do we get from this patch, this chunk to this chunk to this chunk? And if you just kind of read where I'm going next. So sometimes you're writing, you read where you're going next, and by the end of your 5 minutes, you might include a transition naturally, or when your 5-minute timer goes up, before you jump into the next text, you might say, what's one word that connects these two? And then write a sentence that has that one word. You may say, okay, great, I've got all these chunks from the last 10-hour week. How do I go back and do it? And if you find that your last 10 weeks are chunky, use this one word process and just add a sentence in between. The reason I didn't tell you this early on is because it will kind of overwhelm people, and I want to keep it simple. And it's absolutely an editorial rewrite thing to do is write transitions. In fact, usually an editor will look at a script and say, hey, this is great, I love these kind of ideas, but you're missing a transition here, and I got a little lost here. I mean, it really is like a left brain activity, and I don't want to take you into your left brain thinking how to weave it all together. That's why I'm giving you a shortcut and kind of a writing hack. Okay, so that's a fun way to weave your quilt and make it flow. But how do you finish your quilt, right? Which is different than the in between. It's this chapter leads to that chapter. And this is where I recommend that you do up to a paragraph of here's a summary or a review of what we learned in this chapter. First, nonfiction, you would say, I'm giving you a little wrap up. And then you want to tempt them with what's to come in the next chapter. It's almost like, here's why you need to read the next chapter, because you're going to get these benefits. Now, it's less important to say, here's what you'll read in the next one, like as it is to motivate them with a why they want to, so that they can't wait to read it. It's almost like, like, I've heard the term salting the oats, which is, you can't lead a horse to water. Like, we want our readers to stay engaged, and you can't push them to read the next chapter. But if you salt the oats, they're like, ooh, now I'm thirsty and I'll go to the water myself. So you want to tell them the exciting benefits of what's to come in the next chapter without giving away the gold. So that, as an author, gives them an engaging cliffhanger, motivation. And Dan Brown was fabulous about cliffhangers at the end of every chapter. He left you going I need to turn the page. I need to see what's going to happen. So you may want to have fun with the artistry of the final transition paragraph, which might not even be in your blueprint. It might be something that you go back and you do all the transitions later. Okay, so the next point that brings us to is our homework. Let me see, am I missing something? I kind of want to summarize this call. So I'll give you an example of how I transition and tell you about next week. So we have visualized our creative container, which is a place that we will visit again and again, and it'll put us in the right state so that we can have our butt glue in the chairs and be really productive doing our 5-minute chunks with limited distractions. And I want you this week to work, in addition to your 10 hours, to just put an eye on to a transition between chunks by using a word in between each chunk, a sentence with a word in between. And then I also invite you this week to contact your accountability buddy, make sure that you're staying engaged in the course and on target for your weekly writing. What's really exciting and fun this week is that you're gonna take one of a picture of your mock book, find time to do that, post it online, and then next week, which will be fun, because we can all bring our mock books to our Zoom call, and we'll start to deepen into being real writers who have real schedules and are getting to know ourselves. And by the way, I say real. This is, some of us are writers, some of us are authors, some of us are soon to be authors. And I want to say that this meditation that you've been initiated to is a space where you can actually meet with the author self, whether or not you're an author in the outer realms, to actually have a deep relationship to the one that is, the published author inside you. There's so much wisdom that can come through just dialoguing with your own author self, and it is very real. Regardless of who we are in the outer worlds, it is about our esteem, about our ambitions, about our the truth of who we are in the inner worlds. So my invitation, regardless of how productive you've been in the last 10 hours, is to recommit to the next week, and I look forward to seeing you on the Zoom. Okay, blessings.